when I'm not with you, I lose my mind. Give me a sign. Hit me, baby, one more time.
Hello, truth seekers. Today's video can be looked at as a continuation of this video. Chic-Fil-A shows us parallel world currently exists. I'll drop a link in the description. When we last left off, I left you with 3 questions concerning the nature of the Mandela Effect. The first asking if complementary effects are occurring in alternate universes, or is it really just a transition of effects in a single universe? Are memories from the adjacent reality somehow retroactively inserted into people born in the present reality? And the question of what actually causes the transition from a person being in the old reality to the present reality. Credit for this insight goes to Equinaman on Reddit, as well as Recall Vector, which I'll cover shortly. So I'll start with the premise that the reality that is before us, before each of our eyes, is the reality that we see, taken in context to all that we know. The previous video covered this topic as a bit of a binary choice of which reality you'll be in. This video is going to focus it more as a spectra of potentials in a sea of nearly infinite possibilities and universes. So let's describe the Mandela Effect from the perspective of individuals existing in a 2-dimensional plane of individual personal universes with universal possibilities. I take the position that a dot, a human individual, is able to traverse a certain direction on this field of potentials. You can look at this travel as being an instance of an individual's life journey. At some point during that travel, a dimensional rift appears. This rift can represent multiple changes occurring at the same time or incremental changes, but the end result is the person becomes ME aware. There's obviously the question of the trigger of the rift and the question of, is the rift considered spiritual? So taking the spiritual worldview, you then have the possibilities of past karma being an influencing factor of if a person's going to go through this dimensional rift versus if that person with their life path have chosen to increase their knowledge of the world in certain ways, thereby changing what they see and what they know. You have the question of an artificial implantation of that rift for specific individuals accomplished by human intelligences. CERN is an example that's been popularized, and there could be spiritual components to this artificial task. Then we have God speaking to those he loves, meaning a truly supernatural dimensional rift for specific individuals created by God himself, versus the consideration that a person travels along their life path across the reality field towards increased learning, and as the understanding increases, he enters a realm of existence where Satan is more active, bringing in the possibility that it's Satan himself that twists the reality dimensions, causing the Mandela Effect. This is either attuned for specific individuals to recognize, or it's an in total effect for all people that some people just coincidentally, by happenstance, happen to recognize. I use infinity symbols to suggest that this reality plane could be immeasurably large, suggesting an infinite or immeasurable number of possibilities for the realm of which we exist in. Let's take a look at this dot person here. So this person has traveled in a certain direction to this region of the reality field. When this person looks around him or herself, the environment with its information that enters through the 5 senses conveys a very specific history and set of facts that is particular for this portion of the reality field. So in this case, it's the act of traveling, the spiritual growth in its most positive sense, that causes changes initially imperceptible to this person. The further they travel, eventually the changes become obvious. And so for the narrator, myself, I would say that I observe these changes being in line with what we may describe as the Mandela Effect, as well as a perception of what I describe as a spiritual element to political corruption, meaning it's not just logo changes, but human behaviors as well. We have this image here. The image is derived from this video called the Supernal Triangle by Payne. Link to this vid will be in the description. A diagram is shown which describes the continuous expansion of reality through the use of the primordial forces with the universal wave function, free vibration, and intrinsic expansion of the universe. These things occurring in consistency with the mathematics we describe as continuum mechanics. This concept of the existence of the 2-dimensional reality plane also relates to the Hermetic Tree of Life. In this model, physics concepts have been applied to certain portions of the Tree of Life, such as Chokma representing potential energy, whereas Vena represents kinetic energy, with Kether the crown being the point of generation. And although I know it relates to the Ein Sof concept, I'm tempted to also apply the concepts of energy, frequency, and vibration to these three. Essentially, reality generation occurs here. The consequences of interacting forces on the spiritual plane leads to a transition to an invisible point that you cannot see here, known as Thoth. Thoth can be looked at as a transition point for the beginning of manifestation. Here, similar or akin to -0, or the hypersurface of the two-dimensional life reality plane. The traversing, newly incarnated spiritual energies have to go through an organization process in the lower portion of this tree before finally manifesting into the physical plane in Malkuth. The YouTuber here describes the intersection of these concepts in much greater detail. This is the title. I'll return briefly to discuss a second video, potentially of relevance here. I adopted some of the following theorem to share with you from this Reddit post, which will also read: the way this individual describes the situation. Humans exist on planes. Humans exist scattered across the reality plane. It is possible that an individual's entire reality can be considered akin to wearing a virtual reality headset, where what we are allowed to see by viewing the headset screen is in relation to our specific coordinate location on the reality field. And this coordinate position, of course, influenced by our beliefs and knowing. A person on a different nearby square may see a somewhat similar reality field to yourself, but the reality they exist in is still distinct from yours. In this person's own words, "I've been trying to think of a way to explain how the Mandela Effect might work, and I finally found one. Picture reality as a grid. Every square in the grid is minutely different color variation from the squares that surround it. Now picture people wearing VR headsets, all of whom are completely isolated from everyone else and only aware of what they're seeing in the simulation they're participating in, which they see in the VR headsets. Now picture that the simulation they see are representations of the grid that show only their own perspective positions within it. Making this as simple as it can possibly be described, reduce the idea of reality to an extreme minimum dimensionality, squares, and what color variation squares are. People making decisions about which squares they occupy, for the sake of simplicity, that's all one does in this simulation. It's a multiplayer simulation. That means that all different VR headsets have to have some level of communication with the others in order to determine how the simulation plays out. If one player moves to a certain square, that determines one version of reality, which may or may not influence other people. People can learn about others' positions on different squares that are distinct from their own positions through the information communicated to them through the headsets which tracks others' positions in the grid. It's secondhand information. One's own interaction with others is with the information communicated to them by their headsets. That information can sometimes change. That's the Mandela Effect. The question of what really happened, it's all from different people's perspectives via their headsets. The grid relays information which is interpreted from everyone's individual perspectives. People experience their own timelines, but to others, the representations of their timelines may be different. Quantum particles, the observer effect, seems to hint at this. Note, this was posted January 4th of this year. Recall Vector generated this video on January the 7th. We'll view a segment.
And what does an observer have to do with any of this? The observer collapsed the wave function simply by observing.
To attempt to wrap my head around this mindfuck reality and stay sane, I'll imagine that electrons have memory, and I'm the electron that landed in position 9.
While it's likely that the co-occurrence of content on this time frame is likely coincidental, given there are so many people who are able to think about the Mandela Effect in this way, I do leave out the possibility of what I suppose I'll just go ahead and coin as grassroots reality management. The creative endeavors of sovereign, free spirits using their problem-solving capacities, possibly generating a type of force, the goal of which would be to lead to dramatic amplification of information. This information has its own goal to help resolve stress caused by the distortion of a reality, and I mean the evil distortion. A friend wanted me to integrate information concerning the Mandelbrot set into this video. I'm not really at that point of understanding of being able to integrate the concept of fractalization with these nascent energies of the Tree of Life, though I suspect that there are likely mathematics principles capable of integrating the concept of the intrinsic expansion of the universe with the mathematics that results in these very characteristic fractal patterns. This is to provide you with a visualization of the reality field and the concept of the Mandela Effect. So let's say our current reality is in this location at the bottom left corner of the chart. This is the Jif peanut butter version of reality. Some person up north on the field could be existing in the former Jiffy's peanut butter reality. From our vantage point in this part of the field, would we put a search term for Jiffy peanut butter for newspaper search, there'd be a certain number of returns that will still be Jiffy. In this case, 36,000. When we search our own term, Jif, we get 104,000. Now for the local reality of another individual who is, let's say, to the upper right of the field, they may live in a reality with Jif having 2 Fs and no Y. From our vantage point, when we search the term, we find 11,000 hits from information crossing over to this part of the field. This residual information supports the notion of a reality gradient. The mystery is what exists in the transitional point. Can time be added as a dimension, creating a 3D cube? And then with this view, are there human terrestrial forces communicating across different levels, perhaps motivating individuals to travel certain directions, or even creating changes at certain levels? That additional dimension greatly complicates the theory, but can serve as a route for future theory crafting. By taking that out, note how I have the term Jiffy, J-I-F-Y here. I'm not able to find a newspaper reference with this particular misspelling. It could be that universe with this term exists so far off field that information is not percolating through as reality residual. In this context, it may be that the special island in this location of the world is closer to us than this term. So we see the residual information across other headsets. And going back to the analogy of this Reddit user, it's beautiful in a sense that one might say the spelling errors or errors in prop construction for movies can literally be interpreted as us receiving communication from another person's VR headset, oftentimes across time with us looking to the past, but as mentioned in the Chic-Fil-A video, possibly even in the present, with these two worlds being symbolic of a person separated from another on the two-dimensional plane. Now, ascribing meaning to the Mandela Effect with certainty is, as we know from our individual position in the matter, not possible, at least yet. That said, I hold it plausible that the Mandela Effect has a spiritual dimension. Some examples from media help us here. In the chorus of Britney Spears' Baby One More Time, you have the line, "Give me a sign."
Give me a sign.
And this encourages the notion that as individuals travel along the field, they're traveling in search of deeper meaning. In essence, requesting that God give them a sign. Credit to excellent YouTuber Jaqobian. In his Britney Spears Oops, I Did It Again video, he posits a theory that the absence of the headset represent the concept of hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. The evil concept fitting because it seems the character Britney plays in this song is purposefully insufferable and appearing spoiled. Watch the video and you'll see what I mean. The song is complete with the red versus white color theme motifs as well. So that integrates with the abstract concept of the perception of evil. Secondly, Jaqobian also references us to the change in the E.T. movie for his personal reality. Just within the last 2 years, E.T. changed in behavior at the end of this movie, where instead of pointing to the boy's heart area, he points to the area in between the brow, perhaps considered the third eye. And this is later invoked as a dot that appears between the eyes of the Tin Man. To the casual observer, this would seem as some type of deliberate communication from whichever the force is that is causing the Mandela Effect. Now let's take a look at this particular section of the field with Jif peanut butter. I have personally observed what I will describe as a nearly over-the-top dimension to some of the corruption that exists local to my place of living in the United States. Additionally, I posit the theory that some type of energetic force can alter behavior at different points along this plane. Under this theory, here are some of the features of our current reality field localization. We have 6 companies that seem to control a lot of mainstream media. The end effect of mainstream media is universally negative and ultimately distracting of one's life purpose. We have examples of social degradation, for instance, with changes in the comic industry that confuse and distort traditional standards. Numerous young people suddenly losing their existence in our plane. A commander-in-chief who is the spokesperson or poster boy for political corruption, as well as his son even engaging in acts that seem a caricature of true reality. I ask, is this Satan, or is this God's judgment, Or is this the energy of apocalypse? From this theoretical viewpoint, I question if Satan has dominion of certain points along the reality field. Integrated within this concept is a possibility that a person's karma or degree of sin nature can influence their traversal along the two-dimensional plane. But flipped to the other perspective, it can be viewed as God's judgment and not directly Satan's action that allows for this manifestation at this portion of the reality field. Regardless, in the same concept, you can think about how Joe Biden may have appeared previously. This is a screenshot of a clip found on Twitter where Biden actually discourages the continuation of wars overseas. And so I speculate to myself that from our vantage point in this portion of the field, it could be that the same caricatured individuals in this portion may have residual of better former selves upfield. This is an alternative interpretation of the passage of time from the 3D back to the 2 dimensions. I included this image of a toilet to suggest that it's as if we're in the toilet bowl section of the reality field. But perhaps one might also say this is the most exciting area of the reality field, and its excitement is in part due to the energies of apocalypse, which is the energies of unveiling. The image of the fisheye viewpoint is included in this discussion, given the preeminence of this type of viewpoint for all space imagery, suggesting that the Matrix deliberately causes reality to be hard to have certainty around for just this portion of the field. Perhaps in this portion of the field, NASA only went to the moon once, or perhaps even failed the first time they went. But for our portion, there's more confusion, paradoxes, questions of illegitimacy of certain endeavors. So then maybe the lens are not curved in some of these other portions. In this video by R.N. Payne, titled Human Behavioral Programs QAI, QE, EPR, we were reminded of the concept of the electrons. Please recall that, at least according to estimation, humans are composed of over 5 octillion atoms. And each of those atoms has clouds of electrons that can simultaneously traverse all positions. From the standpoint of human-caused Mandela Effect, the physics of the phenomena, especially with the memory change and the synchronicities, can relate to alterations in electron behavior, let's say in the brain, resulting in memory change. And these alterations occurring in specific patterns due to coupling of electrons across time and space, what we know as quantum entanglement. And with that, I barely scratched the surface of this 25-minute video. So if you get the chance, please check it out. Further theory crafting will occur as I'm so inspired. Thank you for watching. I'm most easily found on Twitter, but also Telegram, the purpose of which is to share good information and theory craft. A link to the Telegram and Twitter will be pinned. Take care, True Seekers.